The Deathworld Alliance ruled the galaxy through fear, and nobody dared to challenge them. Their warriors came from the most dangerous planets in known space where only the strongest could survive. The Vorthak lived on a world where acid rain fell every day and the ground burned through metal boots. The Grimlock survived on an ice moon where storms could freeze a warrior solid in seconds. The Nexari breathed poisonous air on their desert planet where the sand could melt flesh from bones. These alien species looked down on other races as weak and soft. They believed that only creatures from Deathworlds deserved respect in the universe. For over 300 years they had collected tribute from peaceful planets and destroyed anyone who refused to pay. Their massive warships carried warriors who could fight for days without rest and survive injuries that would kill normal beings. Commander Hyun Woo of the human exploration vessel sole pride was studying star charts when his scanner detected massive energy signatures approaching his ship. The readings showed 3 vessels, each bigger than his entire exploration fleet. His heart raced, but he kept his voice calm as he ordered his crew to prepare for first contact protocols. The lead ship was unlike anything humans had ever seen. It looked like a giant metal beast with weapons protruding from every surface. The hull showed scars from countless battles, and the design screamed danger to anyone who saw it. When the communication channel opened, a massive creature appeared on the screen that made Hyunwoo step backward involuntarily. The Vorthak ambassador was twice the size of a human, with thick armored skin that oozed acid. Its voice sounded like grinding metal when it spoke through the translator. The creature examined Hyunwoo with 6 red eyes that seemed to evaluate whether the human was worth eating or just killing quickly. However, something unexpected happened during their conversation. When Hyunwoo provided data about Earth and human colonies, the alien warriors became very interested instead of dismissive. The Vorthak ambassador called for more data about human homeworld conditions, and the information made all 3 alliance representatives lean forward with growing excitement. Earth was a nightmare by galactic standards. Active volcanoes erupted regularly and could destroy cities without warning. Massive hurricanes formed over the oceans and could level entire coastal regions. Earthquakes split the ground open and swallowed buildings whole. Tornadoes appeared suddenly and tore apart everything in their path. Floods drowned vast areas while droughts turned fertile land into dust. The wildlife was equally terrifying to most galactic species. Humans shared their world with predators that hunted in coordinated packs. Poisonous creatures could kill with a single bite. Plants produced toxins that caused horrible deaths. Microscopic organisms caused diseases that could wipe out populations. Ocean predators grew to enormous sizes and could bite spacecraft in half. But the most shocking revelation was that humans had no natural defenses against any of these threats. They possessed no armor plating like the Vorthak. They could not survive freezing temperatures like the Grimlock. They had no resistance to toxins like the Nexari. Yet somehow they had not only survived on this death world, but had actually thrived and spread across it. The Alliance representatives exchanged glances that Hyunwoo could not interpret. The Grimlock warrior spoke next, and its voice rumbled like an avalanche. It wanted to know how humans had survived when they seemed so physically weak compared to true Deathworld species. The question was asked with genuine curiosity rather than mockery. Hyunwoo found himself explaining human history and adaptation without revealing too much about their capabilities. He described how humans had learned to work together to overcome environmental challenges. He mentioned their ability to create tools and modify their surroundings rather than just enduring harsh conditions. He spoke about human ingenuity in finding solutions to problems that seemed impossible. The Nexari representative made a sound that the translator indicated was approval. It spoke about how most species either adapted physically to their worlds or died out completely. The Alliance had never encountered a species that seemed to adapt through intelligence and cooperation, rather than evolutionary changes. This made humans very interesting to them. What followed was an invitation that surprised everyone, including Hyunwoo himself. The Deathworld Alliance wanted to offer humanity membership in their organization. This was unprecedented because the Alliance had never recruited new members before. They had formed their partnership centuries ago and considered themselves the only true survivors in the galaxy. The ambassador explained that membership in the Alliance came with benefits that most species could only dream about. Alliance worlds were protected from invasion by the combined might of all member fleets. Trade routes controlled by the Alliance were the most profitable in the galaxy. Most importantly, Alliance membership meant respect and fear from every other civilization in known space. However, membership also came with responsibilities and tests. New members had to prove their worth through trials that had killed many hopeful candidates over the years. They would need to demonstrate that they truly came from a death world and possessed the strength to survive alongside the galaxy's most dangerous species. The Alliance representatives transmitted coordinates for Nexus Station, where the formal invitation would be presented to human leadership. They warned that the journey itself would be dangerous as Alliance space was filled with hazards that destroyed ships from softer worlds. Only true Deathworld vessels could make the trip safely. After the alien ships departed, Hyun-woo found himself staring at empty space while his crew worked quietly around him. The implications of what had just occurred were staggering for humanity. Earth had been isolated from galactic politics for so long that most humans assumed they were alone in the universe. Now they had been invited to join the most feared organization in known space. The message he would send back to Earth would change everything for human civilization. Admiral Jin Ho and the Earth Defense Council would need to decide whether humanity was ready to take its place among the galaxy's apex predators. The invitation was both an incredible opportunity and a potentially deadly trap. Hyun-woo began composing his report while wondering if he had just helped humanity take the first step toward greatness or destruction. The Alliance creatures had seemed impressed by human survival abilities, but they clearly expected much more from potential members. Whatever tests awaited humanity would likely be unlike anything they had ever faced before. The Soul Pride turned toward home carrying news that would soon reach every human colony and outpost. Humanity had been noticed by powers beyond their understanding, and the galaxy would never look the same again. Whether this first contact would lead to prosperity or catastrophe remained to be seen, but one thing was certain: the age of human isolation had ended forever. 3 weeks after Commander Hyun-woo returned to Earth with news of the Alliance invitation, Admiral Jin Ho stood before the Global Defense Council in Geneva, making the most important decision in human history. The data from the first contact had been analyzed by every expert on the planet, and the conclusion was unanimous. This was an opportunity humanity could not afford to miss. Captain Boram from the Diplomatic Corps had been chosen to lead the human delegation to Nexus Station along with a carefully selected team of representatives from every major nation on Earth. The journey through Alliance space would take 2 months and serve as the first real test of human capabilities in the dangerous regions controlled by the Deathworld species. The human fleet consisted of 5 vessels, including 2 military escorts and 3 diplomatic ships, carrying the delegation and supplies for extended operations in hostile space. The ships had been upgraded with the best technology Earth could provide, but everyone knew they were still primitive compared to Alliance vessels that had been designed for survival. In the deadliest regions of the galaxy, as the human fleet entered Alliance territory, they immediately encountered the hazards that made this space so dangerous. Radiation storms that could kill unprotected crews swept across their path every few hours. Asteroid fields moved in unpredictable patterns that had crushed countless ships over the centuries. Gravitational anomalies pulled vessels off course and into the crushing embrace of dead stars. But something unexpected happened during the journey. Instead of struggling to survive like most visitors to Alliance space, the human crews began adapting to the dangerous conditions. With remarkable speed, Captain Boram watched with growing pride as her people found creative solutions to problems that had destroyed other civilizations for generations. Engineer Da-Yun modified the ship's radiation shielding using techniques developed for deep space mining operations. The improvements were so effective that the human vessels could travel through radiation storms that forced even Alliance ships to take shelter. Navigator Tae-min used pattern recognition skills learned from studying Earth weather systems to predict asteroid field movements with uncanny accuracy. The military escort ships commanded by Colonel Minho began treating the journey like an extended training exercise. His crews studied every hazard they encountered and developed new tactical procedures for operating in Alliance space. Within weeks, the human fleet was moving through dangerous regions faster and safer than the Alliance guides had thought possible. When the fleet finally reached Nexus Station, the massive fortress impressed everyone aboard the human vessels. The station was built inside a hollow asteroid and reinforced with armor plating that could withstand direct hits from capital ship weapons. Docking bays were designed for vessels 3 times larger than human ships, and the corridors could accommodate creatures the size of small buildings. Ambassador So Young led the human delegation through the station's imposing hallways where every surface seemed designed to intimidate visitors. The walls displayed weapons and trophies from conquered worlds, while holographic displays showed the military might of Alliance fleets. The message was clear: only the strongest deserved to walk these corridors. The welcoming ceremony took place in the Great Hall, where representatives from all Alliance worlds had gathered to evaluate the newest candidates for membership. The Vorthak delegation occupied a section of the hall where acid-resistant platforms protected them from their own corrosive bodily fluids. The Grimlock warriors stood in an area kept at freezing temperatures that would kill most species in minutes. The Nexari representatives breathed through filtration masks that allowed them to survive in the station's atmosphere, while their section of the hall was filled with the poisonous gases they required. The sight of so many deadly creatures gathered in one place would have terrified most galactic species, but the human delegation maintained their composure with quiet dignity. Alliance Supreme Commander Vraktor addressed the assembly with a voice that rumbled through the hall's massive speakers. The ancient Vorthak warrior had led the Alliance for over 2 centuries, and his presence commanded absolute respect from every creature present. His 6 red eyes focused on the human delegation, with obvious curiosity mixed with skepticism. The commander explained that membership in the Deathworld Alliance required more than just surviving on a dangerous planet. Candidates must prove they possessed the warrior spirit necessary to stand alongside the galaxy's most feared species. They must demonstrate that their world had truly forged them into creatures capable of thriving in conditions that would destroy lesser beings. The traditional test involved survival on Karax 7, a volcanic moon that served as the Alliance's proving ground for new members. The world was a hellscape of active volcanoes, toxic atmosphere, and deadly native predators. Most candidates barely survived the required week-long trial, and many died despite constant monitoring by Alliance observers. Ambassador So Young accepted the challenge on behalf of humanity without hesitation, but her calm confidence puzzled the Alliance representatives. They were accustomed to candidates who showed either desperate bravado or barely concealed terror at the prospect of facing Karax 7. The humans seemed almost relaxed about the entire situation. Sergeant Minho was selected to lead the human test team of 12 volunteers representing different specialties from military combat to scientific research. Each volunteer had been chosen for their expertise in survival situations and their ability to work effectively as part of a coordinated team. The selection process had taken months and involved candidates from every branch of human services. The night before departure to Karax 7, the human team gathered in their assigned quarters aboard Nexus Station to review their plans and equipment. Alliance observers monitoring their communications were surprised by what they heard. Instead of desperate strategizing or emotional farewells, the humans discussed their upcoming trial, like it was an interesting camping trip. Dr. Wonshik, the team's biologist, expressed excitement about studying the unique ecosystem they would encounter. Engineer Kyung-soo looked forward to testing some new equipment designs in extreme conditions. Medic Yoon-ji reviewed treatment protocols for volcanic gas exposure with the casual manner of someone preparing for routine duty. The Alliance observers had monitored hundreds of test candidates over the years, and they had never seen such calm preparation. Most species spent their final night before Karax 7 in prayer meditation or desperate attempts to steel themselves for the ordeal ahead. The human attitude seemed almost insulting to the gravity of the situation. When morning came, the human team boarded their transport vessel with the same quiet confidence they had shown throughout their stay at Nexus Station Alliance. Representatives who had come to see them off were struck by the absence of dramatic speeches or emotional displays. The humans simply checked their equipment one final time and prepared for departure, as the transport ship carrying the human test team disappeared into hyperspace toward Karax. 7 Supreme Commander Vrak-Tor turned to his advisors with a thoughtful expression. The ancient warrior had seen many species attempt the trials over his long lifetime, but these humans were unlike anything he had encountered before. The betting pools that Alliance warriors maintained for test candidates showed interesting odds. Most observers expected the humans to survive based on their impressive journey through Alliance space, but few believed they would thrive on Karax 7. The way they would face the trials remained to be seen, but one thing was certain. The next week would reveal whether humanity truly belonged among the galaxy's apex predators. Karax 7 was everything the Alliance had promised and worse. The volcanic moon spun through space like a ball of molten rock wrapped in poisonous clouds. The surface temperature could melt most metals, and the atmosphere was so toxic that one breath without protection would kill any known species. The native predators had evolved to thrive in conditions that would instantly destroy normal life forms. Sergeant Minho led his 12-person team down to the surface in a basic survival pod that would provide shelter for exactly 24 hours. After that, they would be completely on their own with only the equipment they could carry. The Alliance observers watching from orbit expected to see the usual pattern of desperate struggle, followed by gradual adaptation or death. Instead, something completely unexpected happened within the first few hours of landing. The human team did not frantically search for shelter or fight against the hostile environment like every other species had done before them. They calmly surveyed their surroundings and began working together with an efficiency that surprised the monitoring. Alliance representatives Engineer Da-Un immediately began studying the volcanic activity patterns around their landing site instead of simply avoiding the dangerous areas. She identified geothermal vents that could provide power and heat sources that other species had never thought to utilize. Biologist Wanshik started collecting samples of the toxic atmosphere and native minerals with obvious excitement rather than fear. The team established their base camp using a combination of their survival pod and materials they gathered from the environment itself. Within 6 hours, they had expanded their shelter and created a filtration system that turned the moon's poisonous atmosphere into breathable air. The Alliance observers had never seen anything like it in centuries of monitoring survival trials. By the end of the first day, the humans were not just surviving, they were beginning to thrive. Medic Yunji had identified several native plants that contained useful compounds for treating injuries. Team leader Jun Sik had organized hunting parties that successfully captured some of the smaller predators for food, rather than simply defending against attacks. The monitoring Alliance representatives called an emergency conference aboard their observation ship. Supreme Commander Vrak-Tor himself joined the discussion, because the reports from Karax 7 were unlike anything in Alliance records. Most species spent their first week simply staying alive long enough to be rescued. The humans appeared to be building a permanent settlement. Navigator Tai Min had mapped safe travel routes across the volcanic terrain and discovered caves that provided natural protection from the worst environmental hazards. Engineer Kyung-Soo designed tools using volcanic glass and native metals that were actually superior to some standard Alliance equipment. The team was turning the Deathworld into a resource rather than treating it as an enemy to endure. On the third day, something happened that shocked even the most experienced Alliance observers. The native predators of Karax 7 began avoiding the human settlement instead of attacking it constantly, like they did with other species. The humans had not defeated the creatures through superior strength or armor. They had studied predator behavior patterns and used psychological tactics to establish dominance. Dr. Haye Jin, the team's anthropologist, had worked with Wanshik to understand how the predators communicated and organized their pack structures. Using this knowledge, the humans created warning systems and territorial markers that convinced the native creatures to hunt elsewhere. The predators seemed to recognize the humans as a more dangerous threat than they appeared. By the 5th day, the human settlement had grown into a functioning colony complete with power, generation, water purification, food production, and defensive systems. The team had even begun recreational activities including games and storytelling sessions around their geothermal heating units. The Alliance observers could not believe what they were witnessing. Engineer Yoon had created a geothermal power system that was more efficient than anything currently used on Alliance worlds. The design was so innovative that several Alliance engineers requested detailed technical specifications. The system used the moon's volcanic activity as an energy source rather than simply surviving. Despite the dangerous conditions, biologist Wan Shik had cataloged over 30 new species and identified their potential uses for everything from medicine to construction materials. His research notes were more comprehensive than studies conducted by Alliance science teams over much longer periods. The human approach to xenobiology was completely different from anything the Alliance had encountered. Most shocking of all, the humans had begun terraforming their immediate area. Botanist Jiwoo had successfully grown earth plants using modified volcanic soil and atmospheric processors. The sight of green vegetation thriving on Karak 7 was something no Alliance member had ever imagined possible. The humans were not adapting to the Deathworld, they were making it adapt to them. On the 7th and final day of the trial, the Alliance rescue ships arrived expecting to find exhausted survivors desperately grateful to leave the nightmare world behind. Instead, they discovered a thriving settlement with humans who seemed reluctant to abandon their new home. The contrast with every previous trial was so stark that it challenged everything the Alliance believed about. Survival team leader Jun Sik gave the Alliance representatives a tour of their settlement, pointing out innovations and improvements they had made to the environment. The humans had not merely endured Karak 7, they had transformed it into a place where life could flourish. The volcanic hellscape now contained areas that were actually pleasant to inhabit. When Supreme Commander Vraktor asked how they had accomplished what seemed impossible, Sergeant Minho gave an answer that would be remembered throughout Alliance space for generations. He explained that humans had learned long ago that fighting against their environment was less effective than working with it. Earth had taught them to find opportunity in adversity. The Alliance representatives realized they were dealing with something unprecedented in their long history. These humans did not survive through superior physical adaptations or greater endurance. They thrived through intelligence, cooperation, and an ability to see possibilities where others saw only obstacles. This revelation would have profound implications for the Alliance as the human team prepared to leave Karak 7. They left behind detailed plans for expanding the settlement and technical specifications for their innovations. The Alliance engineers who studied these documents found concepts that challenged their fundamental understanding of how Deathworld species should behave. The humans had proven that survival was not just about enduring hardship. The return journey to Nexus Station was filled with quiet discussions among Alliance representatives about what they had witnessed. The humans had passed their trial, but in doing so, they had raised questions about whether the Alliance truly understood what it meant to be a Deathworld species. The implications of human methods would soon spread throughout Alliance territory. Upon reaching Nexus Station, the human delegation was formally welcomed into the Deathworld Alliance, with ceremonies that had remained unchanged for centuries. But beneath the traditional celebrations, many Alliance leaders were beginning to worry about what they had invited into their organization. The humans represented something new and potentially dangerous to their established way of life. 6 months after humanity joined the Deathworld Alliance, the first real problems began to surface. What had started as admiration for human ingenuity slowly turned into concern as Alliance leaders realized that human methods were fundamentally changing their organization. The changes were subtle at first, but they spread through Alliance space like a virus that infected everything it touched. The trouble started on Grimlock Prime, where their main industrial city faced destruction from massive ice storms that had plagued the world for generations. Traditional Grimlock response was to build stronger structures and accept the losses when storms hit. It was a matter of honor and strength to endure what their world threw at them, without complaint or compromise. Director Hye Jin arrived with a human engineering team offering a completely different approach. Instead of building stronger defenses against the storms, they proposed redirecting the weather patterns themselves, using atmospheric processors and heating arrays similar to systems developed on Earth. They claimed they could move the storms away from populated areas entirely. The Grimlock military commander was deeply offended by this suggestion. His people had survived these storms for thousands of years through courage and determination. Avoiding the challenge, instead of facing it directly, went against everything their culture represented. The storms were a test that separated the strong from the weak, and the Grimlock took pride in passing that test. However, younger Grimlock engineers led by a progressive thinker named Thok were curious about human methods. They had lost too many friends and family members to the storms over the years. If there was a way to save lives while still maintaining their industrial operations, they wanted to hear about it. The generational divide created tension throughout Grimlock society. Team supervisor Kyung-soo worked with meteorologist Yoon-ji to demonstrate their weather modification system on a smaller scale around a mining outpost. The installation took 2 weeks and required cooperation between human technicians and Grimlock workers who had never collaborated with outsiders before. The cultural exchange was difficult, but gradually both sides learned to work together. When the next ice storm approached the mining outpost, instead of evacuating or preparing for massive damage, the combined team activated their atmospheric modification arrays. The results were dramatic but not complete. The storm shifted enough to reduce its impact from devastating to manageable. The outpost survived with minimal damage for the first time in its history. The success of the demonstration created a crisis within Grimlock leadership. The practical benefits were obvious and undeniable. Lives had been saved and valuable equipment had been protected, but accepting human methods meant abandoning traditions that had defined their people for millennia. The debate split Grimlock society between traditionalists and progressives. Similar conflicts erupted across Alliance space. On the Vorthak homeworld, human chemist Dr. Wanshik developed acid-resistant crops that could grow in their harsh environment, reducing the need for dangerous raids on neighboring systems. The Vorthak military appreciated having more food available, but worried about losing their warrior traditions if raids became unnecessary. The Nexari received help from human desert specialist Dr. Jiwoo, who showed them how to extract moisture from their poisonous atmosphere using techniques developed in Earth's harshest deserts. The technology could transform their civilization by providing abundant water for the first time in their history. But it also threatened the scarcity-based social structures that had governed their society for centuries. Human solutions kept appearing wherever Alliance species faced traditional hardships. Trade routes that had been deadly for generations became safe highways after human navigation teams mapped passages through asteroid fields and radiation zones. Worlds that had been barely habitable became productive colonies with human environmental engineering. The Alliance military doctrine faced its greatest challenge during joint training exercises. General Subin commanded human military advisors who demonstrated tactics that made traditional Alliance methods look primitive. Where Alliance forces relied on overwhelming strength and endurance, humans used strategy, misdirection, and psychological warfare to achieve superior results. During one memorable exercise, Alliance forces attacked a fortified position using their standard frontal assault tactics. The defenders were human, troops who did not try to match their attackers' superior physical strength. Instead, they used decoys, ambush tactics, and environmental advantages to defeat a numerically superior force without losing a single soldier. The Alliance commanders were impressed by the results but deeply disturbed by the implications. The exercise proved that intelligence and planning could overcome raw strength and endurance. This challenged the fundamental beliefs that had held the Alliance together for centuries. Where was the honor and victory achieved through cleverness rather than courage? Captain Dongmin tried to explain human military philosophy to confused Alliance officers. He described how Earth had taught humanity that the smartest fighter usually defeated the strongest fighter. Survival was not about being tough enough to endure punishment. It was about being smart enough to avoid unnecessary punishment entirely. This philosophy spread throughout human interactions with Alliance species. Human merchants established trade networks that bypassed the traditional tribute systems that had enriched Alliance worlds for centuries. Human diplomats negotiated peaceful solutions to conflicts that the Alliance preferred to settle through combat. Human scientists shared technologies that made traditional hardships obsolete. Most troubling of all, younger members of Alliance species began adopting human methods despite opposition from their leaders. Young Grimlock engineers abandoned traditional building techniques for human architectural designs that better survive storms. Young Vorthak farmers started using human agricultural methods that produced more food with less danger. The Alliance leadership watched their warrior culture slowly, eroding as practical human solutions replaced time-honored traditions. What had started as respect for fellow Deathworld survivors was becoming a threat to everything the Alliance represented. The humans were not trying to conquer Alliance space, but their very presence was conquering Alliance minds. President Chang Ho of the human delegation tried to address these concerns in emergency meetings with Alliance leaders. He insisted that humans were not trying to change Alliance cultures and that every species should keep what made them unique. Human methods were simply alternatives, not replacements for traditional ways, but the damage was already spreading beyond control. Younger Alliance members were questioning why they should suffer through traditional hardships when human alternatives offered easier paths. The Alliance foundation that strength came from enduring impossible conditions was being undermined by human proof that conditions did not have to be impossible. The crisis deepened when Alliance species began requesting human advisors and technologies directly, rather than going through official channels. Grimlock colonies wanted weather modification systems, Vorthak settlements requested agricultural specialists, Nexari outposts needed water extraction equipment. The demand for human expertise was overwhelming. Traditional Alliance authority structures. Supreme Commander Vrak Tor found himself facing the greatest challenge of his long career. The Alliance had survived wars, rebellions, and natural disasters, but they had never faced an enemy that attacked their beliefs, rather than their bodies. The humans were destroying Alliance culture through kindness and competence, rather than conquest and violence. Emergency sessions of the Alliance Council became heated debates about the future of their organization. Traditional hardliners demanded restrictions on human activities while progressives argued for embracing change. The discussions revealed deep philosophical divisions that had been hidden beneath centuries of shared struggle against hostile environments. The breaking point was approaching as Alliance society split between those who valued tradition and those who valued progress. The humans had proven that their methods worked, but success came at the cost of everything the Alliance had believed about strength, survival, and honor. The question was whether the Alliance could adapt to human influence, or whether that influence would destroy them entirely. The final crisis arrived without warning, when deep space monitoring stations detected a massive spatial anomaly moving toward the heart of Alliance territory. The phenomenon was unlike anything seen before, a swirling mass of dark energy that consumed everything in its path, including light itself. The anomaly was heading directly for Nexus Station and several heavily populated Alliance colonies. Traditional Alliance response to such disasters had always been the same: evacuate what could be saved, accept the losses that could not be prevented, and face the catastrophe with stoic dignity. Their ancestors had survived countless natural disasters through courage and endurance. The Alliance leadership prepared to follow the same path their people had walked for generations. Science Director Young Ho arrived at Nexus Station with the largest human research team ever assembled in Alliance space. His people had been studying the anomaly data for weeks and believed they had found a solution. Using techniques developed for managing Earth's magnetic field and atmospheric phenomena, they proposed redirecting the anomaly away from populated areas. The plan was ambitious beyond anything the Alliance had ever attempted. It required precise coordination between human scientists and Alliance engineers from all member species. New technologies would need to be developed and deployed within weeks. Traditional hierarchical command structures would need to be abandoned in favor of flexible, human organizational methods. Many Alliance leaders opposed the plan immediately. Supreme Commander Vrak Tor stood before the Emergency Council and declared that they should face this disaster, as they always had, with courage and acceptance of whatever fate brought them. These human tricks would make them weak and dependent on outsiders rather than relying on their own strength. The senior Grimlock commander agreed completely. His people had faced ice storms, volcanic eruptions, and atmospheric collapse. Without asking for help from anyone, they would not start running from danger now, even if it meant the destruction of entire colonies. Honor demanded that they face the anomaly with the same courage their ancestors had shown. But the younger Alliance Members led by progressive engineers and scientists who had worked with humans supported the human plan. They had seen human methods work repeatedly over the past months and could not accept letting millions die when an alternative existed. The generational divide that had been growing throughout Alliance space exploded into open conflict. Research coordinator Heywan worked desperately with allied scientists from all species to develop the anomaly redirection technology, while political advisor Jin Young tried to hold the fracturing alliance together through emergency diplomatic sessions. The organization was splitting apart just when unity was most needed to face the crisis. The younger alliance members began implementing the human plan. Despite official opposition, Grimlock engineers modified their industrial equipment to serve as magnetic field generators. Vorthak chemists developed new materials that could withstand the energies involved. Nexari navigators plotted precise trajectories for the redirection arrays. Meanwhile, traditional Alliance forces prepared for evacuation and damage control following their established disaster protocols. The two approaches created chaos as different groups worked toward completely different goals. Some colonies received evacuation orders while others were told to prepare for anomaly redirection operations. Engineer Commander Mi Young coordinated the technical aspects of the redirection plan from a command center established aboard Nexus Station. Her team worked around the clock to integrate human technology with Alliance systems, creating hybrid solutions that neither species could have developed alone. The cooperation was unprecedented in Alliance history as the anomaly approached the point of no return. Both factions realized that only one approach could be attempted. There was no time for compromise or half measures. Either they would evacuate and accept massive losses, or they would attempt redirection and risk even greater catastrophe if the plan failed. The critical moment came when Supreme Commander Vraktor made the most difficult decision of his long career. Faced with the choice between certain disaster and uncertain salvation, he authorized the redirection attempt. The traditional Alliance approach had served them well for centuries, but this crisis was beyond anything they had faced before. The redirection operation required every Alliance world to coordinate their efforts with precision, timing. Any mistake would doom the entire plan and possibly make the anomaly even more dangerous. The human command structure proved essential as information flowed rapidly between different species and locations without the delays of traditional hierarchies for 3 days. Alliance and human forces worked together, implementing the most complex engineering project in galactic history. Massive arrays of field generators were positioned throughout the threatened region while space fleets provided power and coordination. The sight of traditionally independent Alliance species working as a unified team was remarkable. The anomaly redirection succeeded beyond all expectations. The massive phenomenon was shifted away from populated areas and sent harmlessly into empty space. Millions of lives were saved and dozens of colonies were preserved. The human plan had worked perfectly, but the success came at a terrible cost for the Alliance. In the aftermath of the crisis, Alliance leadership faced an uncomfortable truth. Human methods had proven superior to traditional Alliance approaches in every measurable way. The redirection success demonstrated that intelligence and cooperation were more effective than strength and endurance for solving complex problems. The younger Alliance members who had supported the human plan were vindicated, but their victory created an impossible situation for traditional leaders. Accepting human superiority meant abandoning everything the Alliance had believed about survival and strength. Rejecting it meant ignoring evidence that could have prevented the crisis entirely. Supreme Commander Vraktor called for a final Alliance Council meeting, where the future of their organization would be decided. The ancient warrior stood before representatives from all member worlds and acknowledged that humanity had saved them, but also changed them in ways that could not be undone. The decision reached was painful, but necessary. The Alliance leadership voted to formally expel humanity from their organization, not out of anger or hatred, but out of recognition that human and Alliance philosophies were fundamentally incompatible. Humans had proven that suffering was optional, but the Alliance was built on the belief that suffering created strength. Ambassador So Young received the expulsion notice with mixed emotions. She understood the Alliance position, even while disagreeing with it. Humanity had gained valuable allies among younger alliance. Members established profitable trade relationships and proven their worth among the galaxy's toughest species. The expulsion ceremony was conducted with respect rather than hostility. Alliance leaders acknowledged that humans were indeed from a true Deathworld and worthy of admiration, but their methods threatened the cultural identity of every Alliance species. The Nexari elder spoke for all of them when addressing the departing humans. He admitted that humans had shown them a better way, but following that path would mean ceasing to be who they were. The Alliance was built on the idea that hardship created strength, and humans had proven that intelligence made hardship unnecessary. This fundamental contradiction could not be resolved as human ships departed Alliance space for the final time. Captain Boram reflected on the irony of their situation. Earth had produced the ultimate Deathworlders, not because they were toughest or strongest, but because they refused to accept that suffering was inevitable. In a galaxy where survival meant enduring hardship, humans had eliminated hardship itself. The Deathworld Alliance continued after humanity left, but forever changed by their encounter with human methods. They had invited humans seeking fellow warriors who could match their strength. Instead, they discovered a species that made strength irrelevant through intelligence and cooperation. The galaxy's most feared organization learned that sometimes the most dangerous Deathworlders are those who refuse to accept that their world has to remain deadly.